Captain Maya Brooks had been exploring space for 17 years, and she thought she had seen everything, but nothing could prepare her for what stood before her now on the dead. Planet called Valdris figure emerged from the strange crystal, mist like something from an ancient dream, and Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. Because this woman was 8 feet tall and wore armor that seemed to be made from actual starlight, and her ears came to sharp points at the ends, and her eyes were pure silver, like liquid metal. Behind the tall warrior was a creature that should not exist in any rational universe, because it was a dragon, and its scales shifted colors from midnight blue to deep violet, and its eyes burned with an intelligence that was older than anything Maya had ever encountered. The warrior woman spoke, and her voice was like distant thunder rolling across mountains, and she asked, "Maya, a simple thing, do I frighten you?" Human Maya had her plasma rifle in her hands, but she lowered it slowly because something inside her knew that this moment was important, and she looked into those ancient silver eyes and spoke the truth without thinking about it. "First, no," she said quietly, and the words surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise the warrior woman, because Maya added something else that came from deep in her chest: to care for youth. Expression on the warrior woman's face changed in an instant, and there was shock there, and then something softer appeared in those eyes that had seen thousands of years pass by like water flowing in a stream. The warrior told Maya her name was Keleth, Stormweaver, and she was the last member of something called the Celestial Guard, and the dragon coiled behind her was named Nick Shadow, and they had been bonded together for 3,000 years. 3,000 years. Maya tried to understand what that meant and failed because humans barely lived 100 years. And this woman had been fighting wars before Maya's ancestors learned to make fire. Calith explained that her people had defended the galaxy from terrible things that lived between dimensions and in the empty spaces where reality got thin and strange, but her people were gone now and scattered across the universe like dust on the wind. Maya's ship had picked up a distress signal coming from deep beneath the broken surface of this dead world, and she had come to investigate, because that was what explorers did, and what she found instead was a warrior preparing to fight one last battle, all alone. "Your species," as young Keleth said, while studying Maya with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but somehow did not. "You should run away while you still can, because the Void Sovereigns are returning, and they will eat everything in their path, like a fire-consuming dry grass." But Maya Brooks did not run, because she had spent her whole life searching among the stars for something that mattered, and something in Keleth's silver eyes told her that she had finally found what she was looking for. Nikshad made a sound that was part rumble and part song, and the dragon lowered his massive head to look at Maya with eyes that held curiosity and something that might have been a reached out slowly and touched the dragon's scales, and they were warm under her hand and felt like smooth stone that had been sitting in sunlight. Keleth watched this with surprise clear on her face, because Nick's shadow did not trust easily and had not let anyone except Keleth touch him in over 1,000 years. "Tell me about the Void Sovereigns," Maya said, because she needed to understand what they were facing. Keleth's face became hard like stone, and her eyes looked past Maya to some terrible memory that still haunted her after all these centuries. "They are not invaders," she said slowly. "They are not conquerors or enemies in any normal sense, because they are reality itself turning sick and wrong, and they feed on stars and civilizations. Like a disease feeds on a living body, my people fought them for ages beyond counting, and we paid in blood and loss and sacrifice, till finally we had to make a choice between dying completely or scattering ourselves across dimensions to preserve some small fragment of life in this universe." Maya felt cold spreading through her chest, because she understood what Keleth was telling her. "Your people sacrificed themselves to save the galaxy." Keleth nodded, and there was such ancient pain in that gesture that Maya wanted to reach out and hold her, but she held back because they had only just met. "We scattered ourselves knowing we would never see each other again, and knowing that one day that Void Sovereigns would return, because our prison would not hold them forever, and now they are coming back." Maya said yes. Keleth confirmed in 6 weeks they will reach the inhabited systems, and when they do, your people will die along with everything else, unless we can stop them. "How?" Maya asked. "How? Do we fight something like Thadalith?" Looked at her, and for the first time since they met, there was something in her eyes that looked almost like hope with fury, she said, with sacrifice, and was something my people lost a very long time ago. Is that Maya wanted to know hope born from desperation? Keleth answered Jor. Kind fights impossible battles because you are too stubborn to accept that you might lose, and that stubbornness might be exactly what we need to survive this Nix Shadow. Rumbled his agreement, and the sound made the ground shake beneath their feet. Maya made her decision in that moment, and it was not a hard decision at all, because everything in her life had led to this point. I will help you, she told Keleth Will. Fight them together. Khalith studied her face for a long moment, and then something changed in the way. She looked at Maya, and the warrior woman smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise over a new world then. We have work to do, she said. Dawn, Maya. Brooks smiled back because for the first time in 17 years of exploring empty space, she felt like she had found her purpose. They walked together back toward Maya's ship with Nick's shadow flowing through the air beside them like a river of shadow. In starlight and behind them, the dead world of Valdris held its secrets close. Neither of them knew it yet, but that moment when Maya said she cared instead of saying she was afraid had changed the course of history, because sometimes the most powerful thing in the universe is not magic or technology or ancient weapons. Sometimes the most powerful thing is simply choosing to care about someone when fear would be easier, and the days to come, that choice would be tested in ways neither Maya nor Keleth could imagine. 3 days after Maya found Keleth on Valdris, the human fleet arrived in orbit, and they came ready for battle because Admiral Claire Morrison did not trust easily, and she trusted alien stories even less. Maya tried to explain what she had learned. But Morrison dismissed it all as fever dreams or tricks played by hostile aliens, because everyone knew that elves were just myths from old stories and dragons were impossible and the Void Sovereigns were certainly not real. Then Keleth walked into the briefing room. The warrior woman had to duck her head to fit through the doorway, and her presence filled the entire space with something that made the air feel heavy and charged like the moment before lightning strikes. Admiral Morrison stared at her, and all the color drained from the Admiral's face, because Keleth was very clearly real and very clearly not human. Your kind destroyed our colonies 5,000 years ago, Morrison said, and her voice was cold and hard. Why should we trust you now? Keleth did not argue with words because she knew that words would not be enough, so instead, she offered something else. She extended her hand toward Morrison, and when the Admiral touched it hesitantly, Keleth opened her mind and shared her memories with everyone in the room. The visions hit them like a wave crashing over rocks. They saw the ancient war and the void, sovereigns tearing through reality itself, and civilizations burning like candles being snuffed out one after another. They felt the desperation of the Elven Empire as it threw everything into the fight and lost and lost and lost again. They watched as Keleth's people made their final choice to scatter themselves across dimensions rather than let the universe die completely. Lieutenant Sophie Green fell to her knees and vomited on the floor. Commander Lily Patterson started crying and could not stop. Maya gripped Keleth's hand tighter and felt the warrior woman's pain flowing through the connection like ice water in her veins. When it ended, Admiral Morrison sat down heavily in her chair, and her hands were shaking. How do we fight gods? She asked, and her voice sounded hollow and defeated. With fury, Keleth answered, with sacrifice and with something my people forgot in all our long centuries of war. She looked at Maya, and there was warmth in that look. Humanity's greatest weapon is that you do not know when you are beaten, and you fight impossible odds because you are too stubborn to accept extinctionish. I laughed, and the sound made the whole ship shake. The dragon had made friends with engineer Kate Sullivan, who had offered him a barrel of high-grade ship fuel, and Nick Shadow had drunk it like fine wine because dragons apparently appreciated good chemistry. Kate was now trying to figure out how dragon biology worked, and Nick Shadow was enjoying the attention very much. The plan that Keleth proposed was completely insane. There were ancient defense systems scattered across dead worlds all over the galaxy, and these systems had been built by the elves during their long war. If he could reactivate those systems and connect them using human technology to bridge the gaps where elven systems had failed, then they might be able to build a prison strong enough to hold the Void Sovereigns. They had 6 weeks before the enemy vanguard reached inhabited space. 6 Weeks to build an alliance between species that had been separated by thousands of years. 6 weeks to save everything. Maya became the bridge between the two peoples because she understood both sides. Somehow she translated not just words but meaning and intent. She built trust by sharing meals and sharing danger when Khalith taught her how to channel the strange energy that humans called dark matter. Maya felt something click into place inside her chest, like a puzzle piece finding its proper spot. The training sessions were intense and difficult. Maya had to learn to see the universe in a completely different way, and her human brain was not designed for this kind of perception. She failed over and over again, but every time she fell, Keleth was there to help her stand back up every time she wanted to quit. Keleth reminded her why they were doing this, and slowly Maya began to understand. She learned to feel the currents of energy flowing through space. She learned to shape that energy with her will. She learned to fight alongside someone who had been a warrior for 3,000 years. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing. Date was not just friendship, although it was. Date was not just respect, although it was that too. It was something deeper and more complicated, something neither of them had words for. Something both of them needed desperately. One night after a particularly brutal training session, Maya found Keleth standing alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. Warrior woman looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. Maya walked up beside her and stood quietly for a moment before speaking. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Regret what? Keleth responded, surviving when everyone else did. Keleth was quiet for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was soft and saddery. Single day, she admitted, I wonder why I was the one who lived, and I wonder if I deserve to still be here when so many better warriors fell. Maya reached out and took Keleth's hand, and the warrior woman looked down at their joined hands. With surprise, you deserve to live, she said, firmly. You deserve happiness and peace and all the things you have been denied for so long. Keleth's silver eyes were wet when she looked at Maya. How can you say that when you barely know me? Because Maya answered simply, I see who you are and I see how much you care. Even though caring hurts you on, that makes you worth saving. Something broke open in Keleth's chest in that moment, something that had been locked away and frozen for centuries. She pulled Maya close and held her like she was the most precious thing in the universe, and Maya held her back with all her strength. They stood there together while the stars wheeled overhead too. People from different worlds, different times, different everything, but somehow finding in each other exactly what they needed behind them. Nick's shadow watched with ancient wise eyes and made a sound that was almost like a purr. The dragon knew what was happening, even if the two women did not fully understand it yet. They were becoming something more than allies, more than friends. They were becoming what the old elven language called Sal Utheredu, beings bound together by choice and fate and love. And on the dark times ahead, that bond would be tested beyond anything either of them could imagine. The first attack came at Crimson Station, which was humanity's furthest outpost at the edge of explored space, and it came without warning, like a knife in the dark. The Void Sovereigns did not arrive in ships because they did not need ships. They simply tore holes in reality itself and poured through those holes like poison, spreading through water. Maya was on the command deck when the alarms started screaming, and she felt her blood turn to ice because she knew what those alarms meant. The enemy had found them. Keleth was already moving before Maya could give orders, because the elf warrior could sense the Void Sovereigns the way a person can sense a coming Stormneck shot launched from the hangar bay with a roar that shook the entire station through the view screen. Maya watched as creatures of living darkness spilled into normal space, and they were horrible beyond description. They no fixed form. They shifted and changed like smoke, but wherever they touched, matter simply ceased to exist. Human weapons fire lanced out to meet them, and the plasma bolts and missiles hit their targets, but did almost nothing. The void creatures absorbed the energy and grew larger. They consumed the ships that got too close. They were eating reality itself. Then Keleth entered the battle, and everything changed. Elf warrior moved through space without needing a suit, because her armor created its own atmosphere around Hersha, flew like a comet made of silver light. Her blade cut through the void creatures, and where it struck, they screamed in voices that hurt to hear. The sword was not made of metal, but of crystallized starlight. And it was one of the last weapons from the ancient Warnick. Shah dove and wheeled through the battle like a living shadow. His Breath was not fire, but something far stranger. It was concentrated gravity that crushed the void creatures into tiny points of infinite density. Collapsed into themselves and vanished, but for every creature destroyed, two more came through the rifts. Maya watched the battle and her mind raced, because she was trained to see patterns in chaos. She studied the way the void creatures moved, the way they attacked, the way they retreated when damage stand. Suddenly she understood. They are testing us. She shouted into the comm system. They want to see how we fight before they commit their real forces. The realization was both helpful and terrifying. Helpful, because it meant this was not the full invasion yet. Terrifying, because it meant the real attack would be so much worse. Maya started giving orders, and the human fleet adapted. Instead of trying to destroy the creatures directly, they focused on closing the rift ships equipped with gravity weapons. Concentrated fire on the tiers in space. Slowly, painfully, the rifts began to seal. But the cost was brutal. 37 ships were lost in the first hour. 15,000 people died. 15,000 souls gone in the blink of an eye. Maya felt each loss like a physical blow. These were her people, her responsibility, and she was watching them. Daiklith fought like a goddess of war. She was everywhere at once, saving ships that were about to be consumed, closing rifts with strikes from her blade, pulling damaged vessels away from danger. But even she could not be everywhere. Even she could not save everyone. The battle raged for 6 hours before the last rift finally sealed. The void creatures that remained were cut off from their source, and Kelith and Nick Shadow hunted them down one by one until the space around Crimson Station was clear. Though silence after the battle was somehow worse than the chaos. Maya stood on the observation deck and looked at the debris field where so many had died. Pieces of ships, frozen bodies, the scattered remains of people who had been alive that morning. She felt sick. She felt hollow. She felt like she had followed Kolith, found her there an hour later. Elf Warrior looked exhausted in a way Maya had never seen before. Her armor was scorched and dented. Her silver hair was tangled. Her eyes were dull with pain. She sat down beside Maya without saying anything. For a long time they just sat together in silence. Finally, Kelif spoke, and her voice was barely above a whisper. I have fought for 3,000 years. She said, I have lost everyone I ever loved, everyone I ever cared about. I came to this war expecting to die and hoping only to delay the inevitable long enough for others to escape. She turned to look at Maya, and there were tears on her face. But you make me want to live, she said. Your species refuses to surrender, even when surrender would be easier. Your stubborn hope is like a disease that spreads to everyone around you, and I find that I have caught it from you. Shay reached out and touched Maya's face gently. Do I frighten you, human? She asked again. It was the same thing she had asked during their first meeting. Maya looked into those ancient silver eyes and saw all the pain and loss and loneliness that Kaleth had carried for so many centuries. She saw the warrior who had given everything to protect a universe that had forgotten her. She saw the woman beneath the legend. Do you terrify me? Aya said honestly, but not because of what you rue. Terrify me because of how much I care about you, because of how much I stand to lose if something happens to Yakwith. Made a sound that was half laugh and half sob. Then we're both fools, she said, because I feel the same way about you. They came together like two stars colliding. Their kiss tasted of salt and stardust. It tasted of desperation and hope. It tasted of everything they could not put into words. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard outside. The view screen, the debris field drifted in the cold vacuum, a reminder of what they were fighting for, a reminder of what they stood to lose. But in that moment, holding each other close, Maya and Kelith made a silent promise. They would fight with everything they had. They would protect each other. They would face the darkness together. And maybe, just maybe, they would find a way to survive. Behind them, Nick Shadow had curled up in the corner of the observation deck, though Dragon was watching them with wise old eyes. He rumbled softly, and the sound was almost like approval, because even a dragon, who had lived for thousands of years, could recognize something rare and precious when he saw it tanned. What was growing between Maya and Kelith was both. The defense network was nearly complete when the real invasion began, and this time there was no warning at all. The sky simply split open. Not In one place, but in 1,000 places across the galaxy, rifts opened like wounds in the fabric of space. And through those wounds poured the full force of the Void Sovereigns. This was not a test. This was Annihilation Admiral. Morrison pulled every ship from every system in human space. She gambled everything on one desperate stand at the center of the Defense Network. Ships arrived from colonies that Maya had never heard of, vessels so old they should have been in museums, Sevilla. Craft retrofitted with weapons. Everyone who could fly came to fight because there was nowhere left to run the combined fleet, numbered in the thousands. But Maya looked at the enemy forces pouring through the rifts and knew it would not be an Oclith. Called a final meeting of the command staff, and what she revealed made Maya's blood run cold. The network is not just a weapon, she explained. It is a prison designed to seal the Void Sovereigns away permanently, but it requires something to power it, something. It's alive, someone to channel enough energy to close all the rifts at once. Maya felt her stomach drop because she knew what Keleth was saying. It needs a conduit, she said. Yes, Keleth. Confirm then, the energy required will burn through any mortal consciousness. Atita will leave nothing but ash. There was silence in the room. Everyone understood what this meant. Keleth continued speaking, and her voice was steady, but Maya could hear the pain underneath. I was always meant to be that conduit, she said. Is why I survived when all my people fillet am the key that locks the prison. No, Maya said, and her voice cut through the room like a blade. We will find another way, but they both knew there was no other way. The mathematics were brutal and final one. Life to save. The Galaxcyclith looked at Maya, and there was such love in her eyes that it hurt. I am sorry, she said softly. Wish we had more time. The battle began 6 hours later, and it was like nothing humanity had ever seen. The Void Sovereigns came in waves that blotted out the stars. Human ships fought with everything they had. Keleth had taught them new tactics, ways to disrupt the void creatures with harmonic sways, to use gravity to slow them down, ways to make their weapons actually hurt the enemy pilot. Hannah Moore synchronized her fighter with Nick's shadow and created a fighting style that bewildered the void creatures. She flew in patterns that the dragon could mirror. Their weapons fired in perfect sync together. They were devastating. Chief Medical Officer Olivia Hayes discovered something incredible. Human neural patterns could disrupt the void creatures. She turned medical scanners into weapons that scrambled the enemy's coherence. Across the fleet, humans were improvising, adapting, fighting with the stubborn refusal to die. That was their greatest strength, but the rift kept growing for every enemy destroyed. 2 more emerged. The galaxy was bleeding out, and everyone knew it. The battle raged for 6 days without stopping. Maya barely slept. She coordinated the fleet from the command deck. She watched people die. She watched miracles happen. She watched Keleth fight like the goddess she was in the 7th day. Keleth prepared for her final flight. She stood before the assembled fleet in full ceremonial armor. It was ancient and beautiful and terrible. Every piece had been worn by her people in the old wars. Every mark on it was a story of sacrifice. And Aeshod coiled around her, singing a dragon's lament. The song resonated through every hull. It spoke of loss and love and the ending of all things. It made strong warriors weep. Maya stood watching and felt her heart breaking. She refused to accept this, refused to let Keleth sacrifice herself. There had to be another way. There had to be. She thought about everything Keleth had taught her about channeling energy, about splitting power between multiple sources, about how human stubbornness could accomplish the impossible. And suddenly she understood. She pushed through the crowd of officers and grabbed Keleth's army. I'm coming with you, she announced. Her voice was steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Eyes went wide with shock. You cannot, she said. You will die, then we die together, Maya replied. You said humans do not know when we are beaten. You are right. I will not lose you to some cosmic equation. If the network needs a conduit, it gets 2. We split the load. We share the burdens. That not what you taught me about channeling energy. The elf warrior opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. In Maya's eyes, she saw the same stubborn fire that had defined their entire relationship. More importantly, she saw the calculations clicking into place. It might actually work to conduits instead of one. The energy split between them, neither one taking the full killing blow. It was insane. It was desperate. It might be possible. Morrison tried to order Maya to stand down, Sophie Green begged her to reconsider, but Maya had made her choice, and nothing would change her mind. She looked at Kelleth and smiled. Ready, she asked the warrior woman. Smiled back, and it was like watching the sunrise. Ready, she confirmed. They flew together into the heart of the largest rift. Maya and Kelleth and Nick Shadathi combined fleet bought them time. Every ship, every weapon, every last ounce of strength humanity possessed went into holding back the tide. Maya and Kelleth joined hands. As they entered the rift, the dragon's power merged with the elf's ancient magic. Maya added her human will and the jury-rigged technology that had no right to work. But it did work because sometimes the universe rewards the braves, sometimes stubborn. Hope is enough. The pain was beyond anything Maya had imagined. She felt her consciousness fragmenting, her body burning from inside. Beside her, Kelleth screamed in languages older than stars. But they held on. They held each other. They channeled impossible power through their joined hands. The rift began to close. Void sovereigns shrieked as the prison walls reformed. The defense network blazed to life across 1,000 dead worlds, all powered by sacrifice and love and humanity's beautiful, terrible refusal to accept the impossible. In the final moment, as the last piece of the rift sealed shut, Maya felt something impossible happening. Elf's consciousness wrapped around hers, like armor made of starlight. The elf warrior was taking all the killing energy into herself, absorbing the blow that should have destroyed them both. No, Maya screamed, but her voice made no sound in the space between dimensions. Cannot do this. Ken Kelleth's voice echoed in her mind. And I will, because I have lived 3,000 years, and you have barely begun, because the universe needs your stubborn hope more than it needs my ancient grief, because I love youth. Words hit Maya harder than any weapon. Kelleth had never said those words before, had never let herself be that vulnerable, and now she was saying them as goodbye. Maya tried to hold on, tried to pull Kelleth back, but the warrior woman's power was too strong, too old, too vast. Kelleth burned herself to nothing in an instant, taking a death that was meant for both of them, leaving only ash and light and a love that would echo across Eder Newton Nishido's roar of anguish, shattered nearby asteroids. The dragon felt his bonded partner die, and the pain of it was like losing half his soul. Maya opened her mouth to scream, but nothing came out because her grief was too big for sound. She felt Kelleth's essence flowing into her in that last moment. Memories of 3,000 years' knowledge of ancient magic, a fragment of the warrior woman's consciousness settling into the corners of Maya's mind like a ghost made of starlight. Then there was only silence. Mia woke up 3 weeks later in the medical batha. This war was over. The void sovereigns were sealed. A way humanity had survived, but the price had been terrible. She tried to sit up and found that her body did not work the way it used to. There was power flowing through her veins, energy that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. When she looked in the mirror, her eyes were glowing silver. Kelleth's eyes. The doctors told her what had happened, how Nick Shadow had carried her broken body back to the fleet, how she had been in a coma for weeks, how everyone thought she would die, but she had not died. She had changed, transformed into something that was neither fully human nor fully elf, something new, something that had never existed before. In the quiet moments, she could feel Kelleth's presence inside her mind, not as a separate voice, but as a part of herself. The warrior woman's memories were there, her knowledge, her love. Maya grieved and raged and wept for Dashi had saved the galaxy, but lost the person she loved most. She felt like the cruelest joke the universe could play, but slowly she began to understand. Keelith had not truly died. Day, part of her lived on in Mayan, the defense network she had activated in. The dragon who now followed Maya with the same devotion he had once given to his bonded elf admiral. Morrison found Maya standing in the observation deck 2 months after the battle. The same place where she and Kelleth had first kissed. Maya was staring at the stars with eyes that saw more than human eyes. Should do you frighten me? Morrison asked. Softly, it was the question Kelleth had asked during their first meeting. Maya turned to look at the admiral, and for a moment Kelleth's presence flickered around her like a ghost made of starlight. No, Maya replied, using the same words she had spoken to Kelleth. You care for me just like I cared for her. Morrison nodded slowly. The whole fleet cares for you, she said. You saved us all, not me, Maya said. Quietly, we saved every Onakalith and Nick's shadow, and we did it together. Dragon rumbled his agreement from where he lay coiled in the corn. Nick Shadow had barely left Maya's side since she woke up. The bond between them had shifted, but not broken. He was her companion, now her friend, her connection to Keleth's memory. Maya looked back at the stars there. So much universe out there, so many places to explore, so many people to protect. The defense network was active, but it needed maintenance. It needed someone who understood both the ancient elven technology and human innovations, someone who could bridge the gap between species. Someone like her. She had a purpose now, reason to keep living even though grief sat heavy in her chest. Keleth had given her that head, given humanity a chance to become something. Moretto, join the Cosmic Defenders too.
Oh.
Take their place among the species who stood against the Darkness Admiral. Morrison touched her shoulder gently. What will you do now? She asked. Maya smiled, and it was a sad smile, but it held hope. Toei will do what Keleth taught me, she said. I will fight. I will protect. I will refuse to give up, even when giving up would be easier, because that is what humans do best. Because she would have wanted me to live. Morrison squeezed her shoulder and left her alone with her thoughts. Maya stood there for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead. She could feel Keleth's presence warm against her mind like sunlight through clouds. The warrior woman's voice whispered in her memory, you deserve to live, you deserve happiness, you deserve all the things you have fought. For Maya closed her eyes and let the tears fall. I miss you, she whispered always. Keleth's voice seemed to whisper back, but I am here, I will always be here when. Maya opened her eyes. They were glowing brighter than before. She turned away from the view screen and walked toward the bridge. Nick Shadow followed her, his scales shimmering in the artificial light. There was work to do, a universe to protect, a legacy too. Honorshay was Maya Brooks' former explorer, current defender of humanity, carrier of Keleth Stormweaver's final gift hand. She would spend the rest of her life making sure that gift was not wasted. Dragon and the human walked together through the corridors of the ship. Behind them, the stars burned cold and distant, but ahead of them was purpose, was meaning, was the future that Keleth had died to give them. And sometimes, Maya thought late at night when she was alone, sometimes that was enough. Sometimes love was the strongest force in the universe, and sometimes the best answer to fear was simply to caravan when caring hurt even, when loss threatened to break your vin. When the person you loved was gone, you cared anyway, because that was what made life worth living. That was what made sacrifice meaningful. That was what would keep the darkness at bay for one more day, one more year, one more lifetime. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask. For Maya smiled as she reached the bridge, Keleth's presence warm in her Min-Nekshad's strength steady at her side. Ready, she asked the ghost of her lost love. Ready, came the whispered repliant. Together they turned to face whatever came next, because the universe was vast and there were always more battles to fight, more people to protect, more reasons to refuse the darkness, more moments to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. And love, a love, real love, the kind that sacrificed everything. That love never truly died, it just changed form, became part of something new, something stronger, something that would burn bright against the dark for as long as the stars remembered, which was forever.